Welcome to lesson 2 of the grade 12 nutrition module. In lesson number 1, we introduced the macronutrients, and we also talked about the first macronutrient in greater detail, carbohydrates. Now we're going to continue in lesson 2, starting with protein as our second macronutrient. So, what do you know about protein? What comes to mind? Take a moment to think about that. All right, hopefully a couple of ideas came to mind, a couple thoughts, maybe a couple facts, or a couple questions. Keep those in the back of your mind as we delve deeper into the macronutrient of protein. So what is a protein? Well, first, it is a source of energy, just like carbohydrates, at 4 calories per gram. So it has the equal amount of calories per gram as carbohydrates. Proteins are made up of molecules called amino acids. Our body uses 20 amino acids. Now, the body actually has the ability to make 12 of these. And these are known as non-essential amino acids simply because our body creates them and doesn't need to get them from elsewhere. Now, 8 of them can only be supplied by our diet. And these are known as the essential amino acids. Again, because we can't create them on our own, so we need to get them from our food. Protein sources can be complete or incomplete based on whether or not they contain an adequate proportion of all 8 essential amino acids required to build and repair protein tissues in the body. So let's talk about complete proteins. A complete protein contains an adequate amount of all 8 essential amino acids required to build and repair protein tissues in the bodies. So it has all of those elements, okay? All 8 essential amino acids. Complete proteins are found in all animal products, but there are a few plant-based complete proteins as well. So let's look at the animal-based ones. When we're looking at meat, so coming from cows or pork, poultry means coming from birds like chicken, from duck, from pheasant, fish, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt. Anything that comes from an animal that's a food product, like those, they will be complete proteins. Now, the list is a lot shorter for plant-based. Here we do have some really great examples, though, from quinoa, chia seeds, buckwheat, soy, and hemp seed. So those are a couple examples of complete proteins that come from plants. But certainly you can see that there's a wider variety when we look at the animal-based complete proteins. The other type of protein, as we mentioned, is the incomplete protein. So an incomplete protein source is one that lacks one or more essential amino acid in the correct proportions. So let's just pause here for a moment. Remember, there are 8 essential amino acids. In order for something to be considered a complete protein source, it needs to have all 8 and in the right proportions. So incomplete proteins are lacking either one of the essential amino acids, or the proportions are not adequate to make it a complete protein. So examples of these are grains, nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, and peas. So when we talk about incomplete protein, don't take the name incomplete as though it's not being valuable or nutritious or useful. Certainly they are, because these incomplete protein sources that we're looking at, like these grains, nuts, seeds, beans, lentils, and peas, these are all great sources of other vitamins, minerals, other nutrients. They're great whole food sources. Just when we're looking at this idea of getting the protein our body needs, on their own, grains don't have all the essential amino acids, or nuts or seeds or beans. On their own, they don't. So that means if you want to get the complete protein and you're primarily on a plant-based diet, you'll need to have a mixture of all these different foods so that by the end of the day, by the end of the week, you are getting the right proportions and right amounts of those essential amino acids. So think about that for a moment. I kind of answered this question already, but who might need to be mindful of how they eat to ensure they get all essential amino acids? We talked about the fact that many of the incomplete proteins, those are all coming from plant-based products or plant-based foods. So if you said vegans or vegetarians, certainly there would be a greater challenge there because they're limiting the amount of complete protein sources available to them. Recall when we look here, there's a great deal of animal-based complete proteins, but when it comes to plant-based, the list gets a lot shorter. So someone who's a vegan or a vegetarian would struggle with this. All right. In this case, they will want to get incomplete proteins from a variety of sources to ensure they get all the adequate amino acids over the course of the day. Or you could just crush meals with chia seed and quinoa, but probably that would get boring after a while. So you're going to get a mixture of foods, a mixture of these incomplete proteins to create a meal that will give you complete proteins, or create a variety of meals that in the end will get you those essential amino acids. So coming back to this, an example of this would be getting a sandwich that has a two slices of whole grain bread, some peanut butter on them. So that gets you some of the nuts and grains. And then maybe later in your day, you have a meal that has lentils or beans in it. Maybe it's a vegan chili that has lentils or beans in it. So that's an example of in your day, you could combine a variety of things to get those essential amino acids. So the importance of protein. Well, the amino acids that make up protein are important for many bodily functions. We need them. Firstly, for building and repairing muscle tissue. That's usually one of the first things that people think about when they think about protein is building muscle. You hear people say that, oh, I need to get my protein. Well, it's not just for people who are bodybuilders, because all of us have muscle tissue. All of us have a very intricate system of muscles and joints and bones and skin and everything. And all of those things require protein in order to build them, particularly the muscle tissue. It's an important building block, as I said, of hair, as well as nails and bones, muscles, cartilage, skin, and blood. And of course, it's a source of energy, which we talked about before. But when you look at that list, you can see it's essential. Protein isn't just something that people who go to the gym get so that they can get bigger muscles. It has to do with the fundamental building blocks of our bodies. Additionally, protein-rich foods are slower to digest, leaving you fuller longer, right? Those foods actually take longer for your body to break down, so we don't feel hungry as quickly. They also release energy a lot slower. So some sources of protein here, we can see a mixture of animal-based and plant-based. We see the eggs, the milk, obviously a variety of meats, including red meat, some chicken it looks like, salmon, eggs. Yes, protein, even from spinach, from nuts, avocados. Now take note that the protein we get from certain foods is going to be higher, so there's a greater amount of protein in certain foods than others. So that piece of red meat is beside the avocado. That red meat certainly has a lot more protein than the avocado. Additionally, the protein in the red meat would be a complete protein. And this is something to take note, not to say that a diet with meat is superior to one that is vegan or vegetarian. This is just a note to keep in mind that the amount of protein and the proportions of those amino acids found in the animal products are much more bioavailable and, again, much more complete than in the plant products. So it just takes a lot more work and a lot more diligence on the part of someone who's eliminating meat or is not able to eat meat for them to get their protein. So that's just something to keep in mind. Moving on to fats, the third of the macronutrients, also known as lipids. What do you know about fats? What are some thoughts that come to mind? We hear a lot of things regarding fat when we look at what the diet industry and the food industry has to tell us. So what comes to mind? Once again, log those in the back of your head as we dive deeper into this macronutrient. So what is fat? Well, it is the slowest acting energy source at 9 calories per gram. If you recall, carbohydrates and protein have 4 calories per gram. Fat has more than twice that much, so it is an amazing source of energy, although it is the slower acting energy source. so our bodies don't access it as quickly. If you're going to go sprint after a bus, or you're going to go for a run down the street to catch up to the bus that's 5 blocks down, you're going to be accessing those carbohydrates, and fats will take a little bit longer to access for you to use. Although fat is the energy that generally we are burning as we go through our day. Fats are organic molecules made up of carbon and hydrogen elements joined together in long groups of hydrocarbons. The arrangement of these hydrocarbon chains and their interaction with each other determines fat type. You don't have to remember that at all. But that's just giving you science folks a little bit of a glimpse as to what these actually are. Now, what we do want you to know is that there are 2 kinds of fat. There's saturated fats and unsaturated fats. And unsaturated can be broken down into 2 categories, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. So why do we need fat? We want to talk about this because a lot of what we hear, especially in the diet industry, is that we need to reduce fat. We need to cut fat. Fat is the enemy. Well, just like proteins and carbohydrates, we need to recognize that fats, in fact, are essential. So as we mentioned, it's the most energy-dense nutrient, 9 calories per gram versus 4 calories per gram from carbohydrates and protein. It helps manufacture and balance hormones. And recall that hormones are what transport messages and send messages throughout our body. Basically, they regulate and they control much of what happens in the body. Essential. It forms our cell membranes of every cell. It forms our brains and nervous systems. It helps transport the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Those vitamins can only be transported through our body so that we can use them via fat. It provides 2 essential fatty acids that the body can't make, linoleic acid, which is an omega-6, and alpha-linoleic acid, which is an omega-3 fatty acid. You don't have to remember those, but what I do want you to remember, along with the rest of this list, is just emphasizing the fact that we need it. It's important. Also, it protects our internal organs and keeps us warm, which is helpful in Winnipeg. Oh, there are those words again. Good and bad. We talked about that with our lesson on carbohydrates. So good fat versus bad fat. Let's see what this has to do. So let's take a look at the different types of fats that we'd mentioned. Firstly, there's the love it category. These are the unsaturated fats, mono and poly. These are liquid at room temperature. So you can already start thinking about what are some examples of fats that are liquid at room temperature. Generally, we're talking about oils. Most of the benefits that we discussed earlier come from these unsaturated fats. Some additional benefits include decreasing the LDL or the unhealthy cholesterol and increasing the HDL cholesterol, the kind that we want, the kind that helps reduce the risk of heart disease. It's necessary for blood clotting, muscle movement, and inflammation. Inflammation may sound like a bad thing, but there are times when our body uses inflammation when it's dealing with issues. So that is important. Some sources here are olive oil, salmon, avocados, peanuts, groundnuts, flax, and most seed oils. Okay? It's recommended that the majority of your fats come in the form of unsaturated fats. The next category is the like it, the saturated fats. Now, just because I call this the like it category doesn't mean you can't love it. It just has to do with how often that you might have it in your diet. So the saturated fats are solid at room temperature. Think of cooled bacon grease or butter. The science is conflicting on saturated fats, but most agree that saturated fats should place second place to the unsaturated fats, which provide the greatest health benefits. So sources of this would be red meat, whole milk, cheese, tropical oils like coconut, palm, and cacao. The last one is the limit or leave it. And these are the trans or hydrogenated fats. Now, I'll be honest, I used to just call this the leave it category, but I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't eat. So I'm going to call this the limit or leave it and leave that decision to you. So these fats are industrially produced and designed to be non-perishable, so they can help packaged foods sit on shelves longer. Many countries have banned or limited the use of trans fats. Some negative effects of eating foods rich in trans fats are that they increase the amount of harmful LDL cholesterol, they reduce the amount of beneficial HDL cholesterol, they create inflammation linked to heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And now this is the inflammation that we don't want. And they contribute to insulin resistance, which increases the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So you don't have to know what that means, but know the result. Leading to type 2 diabetes is definitely something not that you want. Some sources are some margarines, although a lot now have moved away from that, lard, and prepackaged baked goods. The reality is that trans fats, although they've been present in our culture for a long time, they're coming to the point where they're actually becoming illegal. And there are some countries in Europe already where you cannot find any products that are made with trans fats because those are banned in their countries. The bottom line, based on the information we've looked at, we clearly need fats in our diet. Low-fat diets have the potential to restrict our access to very essential macronutrients. Instead of eliminating fats, make a point of including more sources of unsaturated fats. So you can still enjoy those other things, those red meats, but maybe that's not going to be every meal, and you can go towards having some unsaturated fat sources. And we definitely want to limit or eliminate the trans fats because we know it's just fact that those are harmful. And so we want to reduce the impact of that on our health. So if you have somebody who says to you, I'm going to a no-fat or very low-fat diet, I want you to think back to what you've just learned about fats and question whether that makes sense or that is wise. Something to keep in the back of your mind. Here's some sources of fat. We've got some dark chocolate. Start with the delicious one there. Salmon, nuts, eggs, cheese, avocado, Greek yogurt, olives. A lot of great sources. So to sum up our macronutrients, we've got our carbohydrates, our proteins, and our fats. These are the building blocks of food. One food item is likely going to possess more than one of these macronutrients. So for example, if I have 1 cup of cooked black beans, I have 15 grams of protein. That is very protein rich. 41 grams of carbohydrates and 1 gram of fat. So it's a mixture of all three. And different foods will have different levels of each. Some may not have any of one of them. Let's talk about the micronutrients. We've just wrapped up our macronutrients. Let's take a look at the micronutrients. So food is a lot more than just macronutrients. One food item like a carrot or rice or steak is a whole lot more than just carbohydrates, proteins, or fat. Food is also an invaluable source of vitamins, minerals, water, and other elements that are essential to a healthy, functioning body. Unlike the macronutrients, which we need large quantities of, the micronutrients are only necessary in small amounts. However, if your body doesn't get the small quantities of micronutrients that it needs, serious health problems can result. So, the micronutrients, we're going to start looking at the first one, which is vitamins. These are natural. They're organic components of foods that are usually present in very small amounts. They're essential for normal bodily function. There are 13 essential vitamins, vitamins A, C, D, E, and K, the B vitamins. And there are 2 types, water soluble. These dissolve in water and are easily absorbed. We need to replenish these regularly because they get absorbed so quickly. Then there's the fat soluble. Oh, there's that little fact. We need that fat. They're retained in the body, in the fat, stored for later use. So we don't need these as often. This is why a low-fat diet can impact the absorption, can impact our health because it impacts the absorption of these vitamins. So if we're talking about the need for vitamins, there must be an impact if we don't get enough of them. That's called vitamin deficiency. So here's an example. If we don't get enough vitamin C, perhaps because we're not eating any of the food items on that list, bell peppers, kiwis, oranges, grapefruits, cauliflower, kale, we can find ourselves over time dealing with a deficiency, which can lead to symptoms like bruising, gum infections, lethargy means getting tired, cavities, dry hair, skin. You see a whole list there. So vitamins aren't just something that would be good to have, they're something that we need. And if we start dealing with some health issues, it could very well connect to the fact that we're not getting enough of those vitamins, those micronutrients in our regular diet. Now, minerals. Unlike vitamins, which are organic substances, minerals are inorganic substances that occur naturally in non-living things like water, rocks, and soil. And they eventually find themselves in the plants and animals that grow within them or are eaten from them. They are important for building strong bones and teeth and blood and skin, hair, and muscle tissue. Nerve function, metabolic processes such as those that turn food we eat into energy. Much like vitamins, a deficiency in minerals can lead to health problems. So if you don't get enough of that mineral, like for example, calcium, you may find yourself having issues with regards to your bone health, especially as you get older. So just a little overview, you can see that all of these vitamins and minerals affect different elements of our health: our heart, our immune system, joints and bones, eye health, energy levels, digestion. One way that I like to look at it is we can learn something from Skittles where they say taste the rainbow. It's the same with our food. The greater variety of colorful foods that we eat, the more vitamins and minerals we'll be able to get, because certain vitamins and minerals are found within certain colors of foods. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're somebody who was like me when I was younger, who the only vegetables I ate were overcooked carrots and maybe corn, I'm really limiting what kind of vitamins and minerals I'm getting in my body. And so broadening what we're willing to eat really does impact our health in a positive way. Some of you might be thinking about pills and supplements. Well, we need to make sure that we get the necessary amounts of vitamins and minerals for proper bodily function. This means that sometimes we might need to take a supplement. So are there situations that you can think of in which someone may need to use supplements to meet their needs? Take a moment to think about that. Well, here's some examples. Perhaps somebody lives in a northern community. What are the challenges there? Well, food doesn't get flown over there or shipped over there very often. And the little that does get shipped is very expensive. For example, buying a head of lettuce would be several dollars. Buying milk, instead of costing you $3 for a 4 liter or a 2 liter, it's going to cost you $10. So there are some issues there with regards to being able to get your vitamins and minerals, and you might need to take supplements to help you get them. Maybe you have a blood disorder and you're low in iron, and getting it from your food requires you to eat lots and lots of food to get the iron. Supplementing your diet with a pill that helps you up the amount of iron can be very helpful. That could be someone even who just has a heavy period and is losing more blood than normal. If you're someone who has dietary restrictions, like people who are celiac or people who are allergic to certain foods, they might find themselves in a place where they're going to need the help of pills and supplements. And so that is an option. The goal is to get it from whole food, but when you can't, you need to take advantage of those supplements that are available. Something to keep in mind, you can overdose on a supplement, which can have toxic effects. Not like a regular drug overdose, but if you were to eat handfuls of vitamin C pills every day, you're going to find yourself with some issues. Natural sources, of course, as I mentioned, are ideal whenever possible because these are the most bioavailable. That means if you had the option of taking a vitamin C pill or eating pepper, hopefully you would choose the pepper if that's available to you, because in addition to the vitamin C, there's lots of fiber in there. There's other vitamins, minerals, nutrients available to you that are beneficial to you, which you can't get in a pill. And it's also made to be digested more effectively than the vitamins and minerals you would find in the pill. To wrap up our micronutrients, water, of course, very important. Most of our body is made up of water. You want to be in a place where you're not dehydrated, because that means that it'll be a lot harder to get hydrated. Just keep in mind, water's super important. How much should you drink? It depends. You don't want to wait until you're thirsty. If you're being active or you're in the heat getting sweaty, you want to make sure to drink a little bit more. You could survive 3 weeks without food, but only a few days without water. So very important that you get what your body needs. Too much of a good thing? Yes, you could have too much water. Most of us won't get to that point. It's called hyponatremia. You're not going to be feeling great. Likely not an issue for most of us. So in the next lesson, we're going to take this knowledge that we've gained looking at micronutrients and macronutrients and put it into practice by starting to look at the food guide and the decisions that we make. We'll see you in the next lesson.